Randy Pitchford, the CEO of Gearbox Software, the company behind both old and new major franchises in Brothers in Arms and Borderlands respectively. One of the more polarizing heads of a company, having many controversies tied to his name. Besides his personal drama, which is hard to divorce from the company that he runs, we have the ever-so-drama-filled story of a troubled MOBA in disguise that was also steered potentially awry by the ever-so-cocksure CEO. Battleborn, one of Randy Pitchford's creations, clearly borrowed many of its elements such as its color and art style, as well as the sarcastic, over-the-top sense of humor from their blockbuster IP and Borderlands. What made Battleborn unique was less of a singular feature and more of its use of a conglomerate of them. Battleborn would have the unfortunate trajectory of launching the same time as Overwatch would go into open beta, and launch shortly after. But besides this very high-profile competitor launch affecting the title, and the drama of their CEO and their lead initiative, Battleborn was a title with its own strengths and weaknesses. Perhaps more of the latter could explain its very sudden drop in population following its launch in May of 2016, and, well, it's being featured in this series. Battleborn might be one of the highest profile flops we have seen from a major publisher in Take-Two Interactive and developer in Gearbox Software. While some of the reasons are more apparent, some can certainly escape identification at first glance. In this episode of Death of a Game, we take our step into the rabbit hole of magic tricks and edgy quotes and attempt to diagnose the largest reasons behind the death of a game, Battleborn. Not every mystery is so mysterious. Every trick has an equally non-tricky explanation. So stay tuned near the end of this episode for the final deduction so I can make sure you guys were keeping up with the clues along the way, and stay for the end credits for a teaser on the next Death of a Game in progress.
The ending of Borderlands sucks! You're welcome, Internet!
Oh, and one last thing, detectives. Stay tuned soon for not only the addition of a new series, a series dedicated to explaining the origins and meaning of video game terminology, but also a new content creator and detective to boot. Gearbox Software as a company started all the way back in 1999 Frisco, Texas. Formed by Randy Pitchford, Brian Martell, Stephen Ball, Landon Montgomery, and Rob Hieronymus, Randy Pitchford would assume the role as CEO, being the face of the company for a number of years. After a number of projects including Half-Life Opposing Force and Blue Shift, they truly rose to stardom in 2005 with the Brothers in Arms franchise that spanned many different titles amongst a number of platforms, including Xbox, PC, and PlayStation. 2009 would prove to be Gearbox Software's mainstream moment when they managed to hit it big with the not-so-likely hit in Borderlands. Often described by CEO Randy Pitchford as the game that was projected to fail. For the past decade, this game has created an entire franchise that across 3 different mainland titles has managed to sell more than 45 million copies. But although the story of Borderlands in itself is surely one worthy of a tale, it's not the story we are set to tell today. Instead, Gearbox Software, likely following their recent successes with Borderlands and the confidence that comes from such, would announce a multiplayer-themed Brothers in Arms title dubbed Brothers in Arms Furious 4, utilizing their previously largest IP. Announced at E3 2011 by Ubisoft originally, who was set to publish the title for Gearbox Software. Gearbox Software would later acquire Brothers in Arms as a series, which then became an intellectual property of Gearbox's. Much like Borderlands was the goofy kick that the looter-shooter loot-em-up style of game might have needed, Gearbox was intending to do the same to the more military, warlike, realistic style of Brothers in Arms as a franchise with Brothers in Arms Furious 4. Originally set to be a casualized sequel with a complete cartoony and stylized approach to World War II as a subject matter, the game would follow 4 characters as they rampage through Germany to track down Hitler himself. It was quite the departure from the previously launched hit Brothers in Arms Hell's Highway, which personally was a classic favorite shooter of mine. That departure, though, for many fans from the military realistic style of game seemed both unwarranted and a bit of a reach. Brothers in Arms Furious 4 just didn't seem very Brothers in Arms. Details about the game ultimately were scarce, especially as 2012 came along just 1 year later, and reports concerning Brothers in Arms Furious 4 stated that the game was still alive, but no longer a Brothers in Arms game. Randy Pitchford revealed at PAX Prime that Brothers in Arms Furious 4 had evolved too far from the Brothers in Arms blueprint and needed to be unshackled, which in turn created an entirely new IP. Randy Pitchford, in an interview with IGN later concerning the change of direction, stated that the fans of Brothers in Arms not believing the game was an authentic experience based on their showing at E3 was a large reason they pivoted off of the idea of Furious 4 in the Brothers in Arms franchise. It would be another 2 years until more details were released concerning this mysterious new IP. Accompanied by a high-profile trailer was the announcement from Gearbox Software that the long-developed behind-the-scenes since 2011 not-so-secret project was finally getting a name: Battleborn. Battleborn was, as Randy Pitchford described, a genre-fused, hobby-grade, cooperative, and competitive FPS exploding with eye-popping style in an imaginative universe. Battleborn is the most ambitious video game that Gearbox has ever created. Or in English, Battleborn was set to be the hybrid of a MOBA title with a first-person battle arena. The competitive mode, titled Incursion, was just that. 5 vs 5 full of NPC minions waging a war against each other. This mode would then have up to 20 levels and would allow for customization of a character, a la the typical MOBA experience such as Dota or League of Legends. Battleborn would feature a story mode playable with friends in a co-op match, or a private story mode, which meant that the game would only be played online. 3 different difficulties would await the story mode, which consisted of 8 story missions and a prologue mission, all designed to be repeatable episodes. Players would choose amongst 25 different heroes, each with unique abilities and playstyles. This was quite the amount of heroes to boast for a launch product, especially for a hero shooter, as Randy Pitchford continued to advertise the game as. 25 heroes, however, made much more sense in the context of a MOBA. Accompanying the single-player always-online and cooperative campaign was 3 versus modes for PvP or player versus player enthusiasts. Incursion, the aforementioned mode, the main mode, was essentially a MOBA-style map with minions on both sides designed to beat down and destroy the enemy team, heroes, and minions. Some secondary modes were added to complement Incursion. There would be a King of the Hill style map called Capture, and another MOBA-inspired game type dubbed Meltdown, which was about escorting as many minions into the enemy base as possible. Now that's a nuts and bolts explanation of the features of Battleborn. The game offers quite a lot up front, but other than resting on the features alone as a means of selling the title, or perhaps the prior track record of Gearbox Software, Randy Pitchford made it his goal to attempt to garner as much hype as possible for Battleborn, taking to Twitter for his choice of platform. Battleborn is a FPS, hobby-grade, co-op campaign, genre-blended, multi-mode competitive, esports, meta-growth, choice plus... Okay. Even if it was true what Pitchford was selling, the way he was selling it could potentially hurt people's expectations of the game. Because sure, it did have most of those aforementioned mechanics, but promising an esports scene before the game even had a scene period has nearly never gone well historically. And although I am certainly teasing Randy a bit, the way that he would describe Battleborn at times just seemed like what you would ask of somebody who just threw a bunch of stuff on the wall and was like, yep, that's our game, that's what it is. When you have a passionate CEO at the helm, it can do a lot for marketing and the advertising of your product, in this case your game, especially with such a polarizing one as Randy Pitchford. However, sometimes a creative driving voice can become associated with a game's failure as well, and using Cliff Bleszinski and Lawbreakers as an example, which I have also covered in my series, sometimes an over-the-top cocksure approach from a developer or a creative mind can put your product in a compromised position. Either it smashes all the newly garnered and freshly minted expectations from all those buzzwords that you used on Twitter, or it does slightly worse and people use the drop in expectations to call your game a flop or a failure. It's kind of a lose-lose sometimes. The giant elephant in the room since the beginning of this video, no, since you guys saw the video title and clicked to watch it, Battleborn had the absolute pleasure of having a similar launch cycle to none other than the most famous hero shooter we have seen yet, Overwatch. Overwatch was pushed forth by gaming industry titan Blizzard at BlizzCon 2014. Overwatch would be a 6 vs 6 multiplayer focused shooter wanting to accomplish fun and over-the-top characters. Both of these things sounded similar to Battleborn's vision. The main difference was that Overwatch was targeting the hero shooter FPS crowd, and not the MOBA crowd. Although Overwatch boasted ultimate abilities that had long cooldowns such as MOBAs did, there was no leveling in the game and PvE at launch was non-existent. Overwatch, unlike Battleborn in that regard, was focusing primarily on PvP modes, and would not boast a campaign mode or even a single-player mode. At first glance, it seemed as if Battleborn was going to have the upper hand in that regard, offering more variety of heroes at launch than Overwatch did, and boasting multiplayer PvE and PvP modes. But as Randy Pitchford later recollected in an interview, their reaction after learning of Overwatch and the launch that was going to coincide with his Battleborn, what was the mood like internally the day you find out that Blizzard's doing Overwatch? Were you afraid? Absolutely, because you notice really quickly that, holy crap, the launch dates are going to step on top of each other. I remember when Blizzard announced Overwatch, we were already committed. We were announced, we had our date, we were running for it. I went over to Take-Two. You know Activision's going to outspend us every day of the week. They're just going to brute force it. We can't overcome that. There's nothing we can do to beat the brute force part of the fight. So we took the attitude of, look, it's not a fight, man. Let's just focus on our goals and make the game that's fun, and the game we want to make, and trust it'll work. These are wise words from Randy Pitchford. Recently acquired Blizzard with a new Activision to match was certainly gonna pour a lot of resources into making sure their new multiplayer-focused hero shooter Overwatch was successful. And perhaps it was best of Gearbox to steer clear of being compared and competing with them. Well, that would be the smart thing, right? This is the same year you had Randy Pitchford on Twitter arguing that Battleborn wasn't actually a MOBA. So instead of averting this Overwatch ticking time bomb, Randy seemed to just throw gasoline on the whole situation. Not only is your game built like a MOBA, you're now telling people that it isn't in a sense to actually draw comparisons from the title that you wanted to avoid competing with. Yeah, that's a bit confusing. Battleborn would have a quiet closed beta test in November of 2015, taking a few more months to make it to open beta April 8th, 2016. And all the while making public challenges to Overwatch, the same title they yet again mentioned in that previous interview that they wanted to avoid competing with. Okay, at this point, I'm convinced this is some elaborate magic trick. Right, Randy? Open beta impressions were erected concerning Battleborn. The inspirations from Borderlands concerning the multiplayer MOBA shooter were certainly felt in both tone and the style of the art. As one writer from Tech Times put it, however, though, that's where the comparisons with Borderlands ended. Battleborn has more in common with a MOBA like League of Legends than with Borderlands. The other unique part of Battleborn in comparison to League or Smite was the fact that it was all first person. And on top of that, another innovation of the MOBA model was that the fact that you took the store with you concerning the typical gold and item shop present in most MOBAs. Battleborn was being favorably talked about amongst critics and those who were able to test the game early on. If such would be enough for the game to do well commercially, would remain to be seen. The open beta was successful for Battleborn overall, as over 2 million players had participated in the test. Gearbox Software, likely on a schedule put on them by publisher Take-Two to launch May 3rd, 2016, well, in a genius act of counter-programming, that would be the same day Activision Blizzard would be opening the beta for their own hero shooter title, Overwatch. At first glance alone, this can be seen as a significant blow to Battleborn. When you take into consideration that the title was also aiming to be priced at $60, that presents with it a number of large problems. First, the two biggest MOBA titles, League of Legends and Dota 2, were both free to play. Second, Overwatch, Battleborn's competition whether they wanted to or not at this point, was being priced at only $40. And since it was a multiplayer only game, the price kinda made sense. Launch had provided a number of problems to Battleborn before it had ever even gotten very far past the starting line. Battleborn was going to be seen as priced out of the market by both MOBA and hero shooter standards. This was a risky position for the game to be in, as unless people really thought it was going to be worth that $60, but worth it when compared to Overwatch, which although was priced lower, had this higher perceived value, yeah, problematic to say the least. Battleborn would continue its launch on May 3rd, 2016. Battleborn would score 69 out of 100 on Metacritic out of 34 different critics, and score a 7.1 out of 10 according to 399 player ratings. Steam, a major PC platform that Battleborn was released to, had mixed reviews at 63% overall. According to Steam charts, Battleborn had peaked at 1,270 players, and averaged around 4,000 or so. These numbers, while not entirely accurate, were dangerously low for such a high-profile multiplayer-only shooter in Battleborn. But the reviews from well-known media outlets such as PC Gamer, IGN, and Polygon weren't overly negative. PC Gamer stated that although Battleborn wasn't Borderlands 3, it was very obviously cut from the same cloth. Talking about its strengths in their review, such as enjoying the few story missions in Battleborn, mentioning how similar they seem to Borderlands might give Battleborn a crisis of its identity to a certain extent. In terms of unique aspects of Battleborn, when compared to Paladins or Overwatch, that was surely going to be the multiplayer PvE-focused story mode. PC Gamer concerning these missions stated that the story missions aren't lengthy. However, and that's the crux of Battleborn's issues, it is hard to not wonder where the rest of the game is. Of the same PvE story mode, IGN in their review stated that Battleborn's 7-hour campaign lives and dies by the quality of 8 stages, which are mostly repetitive with the exception of some standout moments. Each one is essentially continuous waves of the same enemies broken up with more creative boss battles and/or a base defense sequence. Both reviews talk with trepidation concerning Battleborn's PvE game modes, their criticisms essentially amounting to, okay, but it could have been better. That's before we even get into discussing the PvP response concerning Battleborn. This is where nearly every major review I stated said that Overwatch was just simply the better competitor, and it could nearly be left at that. With Overwatch's open beta drawing over 10 million players, that statement sort of seems true. But the argument shouldn't just be, well, Overwatch has better PvP modes and polish than Battleborn, and just leave it at that, when the games aren't really supposed to be competing in the first place. This is where games can face the wound of expectation, especially an incorrect or confused expectation. Randy Pitchford was selling the next Overwatch from the guys who did Borderlands. What Battleborn was instead was as originally pitched, a hero-infused first-person MOBA, which on its own was something of merit as most reviewers, even those that were more negative of the game, could at least highlight. When many players jumping into Battleborn had the wrong expectations, the one that don't assume that you're going to be playing a MOBA at the end of the day, well, you can see how first impressions of Overwatch versus Battleborn could be quite brutal. Since Battleborn has a level curve, you don't get max power until you're level 20. In Overwatch, you're immediately powerful and you don't need time to ramp up to it. This is because, yet again, I have to iterate, Battleborn isn't supposed to be compared to Overwatch. It's supposed to be compared to the likes of Smite. And considering Smite's gameplay loop and overall influence, I think it's quite fair to say that Gearbox Software did a damn good job there. Randy Pitchford and Gearbox Software had the opportunity with Battleborn to differentiate themselves concerning the perception of their newly launched title. And instead of steering away from the giant elephant in the room, they steered right into it. And the result was, well, you sort of expected it at this point. Overwatch would launch a few weeks after Battleborn following their widely successful open beta. Converting over 70% of those 10 million players into sales meant that Overwatch had in just 1 week sold 7 million copies. And in just 1 month, Battleborn's population according to Steam charts had already dropped over 75%, dropping all the way down to 2,317 peak players. Battleborn had no chance to compete against Overwatch. Not only could they not keep up with the cheaper price, they simply just couldn't keep up with the fact that although they had offered more heroes, Overwatch had instead focused on less, but more iconic characters. This is an ever-reoccurring theme in the battle of Overwatch versus Battleborn. Simply put, less was more. Where Battleborn promised many different mechanics spanning different genres and many different modes of play, Overwatch focused on the multiplayer PvP modes and made sure to get those right. Where Battleborn created 25 zany and colorful characters, Overwatch took a more subtle approach to art overall, but also regarding its characters. Heroes in Overwatch have both simple to see and hear cues that allow you to know which abilities are being used and which heroes are being played. Battleborn's art style being so, for lack of a better word, over-the-top flamboyant makes the art style either work, so you love it, or it comes across as just simply being too much. Overwatch is a lot subtler, and thus far less offensive to those who dislike such a colorful style of graphics. Throw in the fact that Overwatch's minimalistic UI and the overall ease of access was just simply better than Battleborn. Damn it, I didn't want to spend an entire section comparing Battleborn to Overwatch, but it's hard not to when you see the overwhelming impact. It doesn't matter that they shouldn't have been compared together anymore. That happened already, and those wounds were mostly self-inflicted. It didn't matter that Battleborn was fundamentally a different game anymore. The perception was just simply too strong. And it didn't matter that Gearbox shaved off $20 from their newly launched game and introduced a new character with it. The cogs were already in motion, and Overwatch was already full steam ahead. Battleborn had already collided head-on with a train that didn't look like it was slowing down anytime soon. population numbers for Battleborn would only continue to shrink. In August of 2016, having shrunk to 1,891 peak players and a mere 692 on average. Those sorts of numbers were screaming for a change. Any change, but a big change, and fast. The $60, then $40, and even the $20 on Amazon and other select retailers' price, this was still seeming like it was too high of a price tag to attract new players. Price point certainly is an issue for some, and more often than not, the damage is done at release when it comes to a business model. But sometimes a dying paid title can still summon a bit of life when making business model changes to free-to-play. According to a Kotaku article in August of 2016, Battleborn was rumored to be going free-to-play soon, a much-needed change for a game struggling to find play period, especially one attempting to be a MOBA in a market of free-to-play MOBAs. Every time we see Battleborn associated with a good idea, or an idea that could end up being successful, we seem to see an equally opposite reaction from their CEO Randy Pitchford. This is almost on brand at this point, when just a month after the rumors of Battleborn going free-to-play was various tweets from Randy Pitchford himself denying such claims. Instead, Randy was stating that it was a free trial, and there would be purchasable DLC. And well, Randy Pitchford would prove to be right, as going into 2017, he kept on his promise of keeping Battleborn a paid product. Instead, Randy Pitchford was more focused on doing more stunts for attention, posting a link to a Rule 34 Battleborn-style subreddit, using porn to advertise his game. I mean, what a son of a... Wait a minute, you genius. I'm sure the addition of a few Rule 34s, though, gets balanced out when you turn your slowly hemorrhaging title to free-to-play to pump some much-needed blood back into the system. In a since-removed interview with Randy Pitchford in January of 2017, Randy fielded questions concerning Battleborn and its lack of success. When asked about Gearbox's return on their investment concerning Battleborn, however, Randy Pitchford was non-committal, stating his publishing partner 2K Games was a publicly traded company. Randy then urged people to understand that we're okay, I'm not freaking out, we're fine. That sounds exactly like what you would say when your most ambitious project at your company yet, as of 2017 in January, was struggling to break even 4-digit population numbers. Meanwhile, Overwatch had sold just over 25 million copies. Kotaku would also break more news concerning Battleborn, and apparently the originally teased and rumored, nearly a year in the making free-to-play trial would be finally introduced, and would make the competitive multiplayer free-to-play for Battleborn. According to the same sources, the Battleborn free-to-play trial thing, as they were calling it, had been delayed multiple times internally, though the end product, which made the multiplayer PvP modes free-to-play, was ultimately what was originally expected. Now that Battleborn was up to 30 characters overall, the trial would allow for players to choose from 6 of those heroes on a rotating roster, kind of like most MOBAs. This made free trial players able to earn heroes over time. In order to play the story missions, you needed to purchase the DLC that would upgrade your game and cost $20. Following the free-to-play trial, Battleborn's population had gone up quite impressively, going from 180 players to 1,561 players peak, and averaging 417 players, which was up from the previous month's 82 players. These little blimps on the radar just weren't enough to sustain Battleborn, an always online multiplayer title, and within 1 month, the population had dropped back down 63%. One more month in August of 2017, and we have seen Battleborn at the lowest population numbers that we had seen yet, even after going free to play. Randy Varnell, hey, another Randy, the creative director behind Battleborn, in the fall of 2017 would signal the fall update schedule would be the last update for Battleborn as a product going forward, and there was no further plans for future content. While this certainly was taken as a dagger by the few in number but passionately infused Battleborn audience, it was not surprising for the struggling multiplayer title. Creative director Randy Varnell and others would be shifted to work on a shiny new Gearbox project, which was probably Borderlands 3 in hindsight. With the development for Battleborn ceasing though, it was difficult to see any positive outcomes for the game, saving Gearbox simply just keeping the servers running, which they would continue to do for a number of years. The short-lived life of Gearbox's misaligned Battleborn, which for some was already seen as quite dead, would continue on for 2 more years until news came out in November of 2019 that Battleborn would have a targeted offline date scheduled in the future. January 2021 would prove to be the final resting place of the troubled hero MOBA shooter hybrid. With the execution date on the docket and Battleborn being removed from digital stores, we know that death is in sight. And if you're like me though, you still might have some questions concerning the rapid failure of Battleborn. We've covered in detail Battleborn and its Overwatch problem. We've highlighted the high-profile, contradictory, and problematic stunts and responses of Gearbox's CEO, Randy Pitchford, but we haven't spent nearly as much time discussing the game itself. The biggest thing that stands out to me regarding Battleborn as a game is the word hybrid. The game, and nearly all of its advertisements, is talked about quite highly because of this particular aspect of the game. The blending of a hero class shooter style of a game, driving inspiration from Team Fortress 2, with the MOBA style NPC minions and objectives from popular titles such as League of Legends and Dota. Battleborn was a hybrid story experience, hybrid PvE PvP game. The issue was Gearbox's pre-existing single-player shooter audience, which had just came off of playing Borderlands 2, was used to a level of polish and content present in a Borderlands game. Opinions of gameplay aside, Battleborn was lacking the strong narrative and overall story polish that Borderlands was rife with. When you compare this to the fact that Overwatch was nearly solely focused on being a strong PvP title, and it shows the dangers of appealing to two different audiences, versus just picking one to satisfy and really satisfying it. Where titles such as Path of Exile focused almost exclusively on the PvE experience, Overwatch, as aforementioned, focused explicitly on the PvP experience. Battleborn, on the other hand, was caught appealing to both, and lacking at both when compared to its most immediate comparisons. The crisis of identity for Battleborn can be seen in more ways than just this. Throw in the fact that the game is supposed to be a MOBA but only features one major lane of play, which not only limits options tactically, but slows down gameplay considerably to boot, and well, Battleborn didn't do the best job at nailing down a design and sticking with it. Because if you just rate it as a MOBA, it isn't the best MOBA. If you just rate it as a story game, it isn't the best story game. And when you just rate it as a PvP game, well, you guys get the picture. Battleborn being a PC and console shooter made some problems as well, such as the issue with a MOBA level progression system being present on console. For new players picking up Battleborn, picking upgrades and navigating the menu for such was a problem you faced at the very start. When you're trying to satisfy a co-op component, a PvP component, all the while pushing a first-person hero shooter mobile title, well, as Randy Pitchford put it early on, well, sort of in his own way, that's a lot of buzzwords, and ultimately with Battleborn, that's exactly what the project feels like from a design perspective. It feels like Gumbo, the game. Heroes, minions, shooters, MOBA elements, a desire for esports, all the while taking blatant inspiration with humor and the world from Borderlands. Sometimes you can just throw a bunch of good ingredients together, maybe even high quality ingredients, and you can make a good stew. But Battleborn, on top of its other highlighted issues, simply didn't have a consistent and replayable enough gameplay loop to keep players interested long term, at least not enough players. In the end, if people are getting access to your game but simply don't want to play it, well, the issues with the game are much larger than just being overshadowed by competition and being outspent by Activision Blizzard. It's a fundamental problem of design. Death of a game sometimes can be a series for the more unknown or mystery-filled stories. The deaths of certain games that came as a total mystery or a shock. While Battleborn doesn't, and didn't surprise many when it failed, it's still a story I believe is worth being told. Because simply answering the question of Battleborn's death with, well, Overwatch or Randy Pitchford doesn't give the game enough due diligence. While those were certainly major factors, in the end, Battleborn succumbs to its wounds. Plural. To make sure you guys were keeping up with the clues along the journey, I have carefully outlined each major reason I have diagnosed for the largest contributing factors in Battleborn's crash and fall. I wouldn't be a detective if I didn't have my fedora, my evidence, catchy music, and a final deduction prepared to put to bed the troubled story of Gearbox's colossal failure, Battleborn. Battleborn's rise from the ashes as a previous Brothers in Arms title might have been best left in the dust. It's not like being spawned from the dead remains of a near universally disliked pseudo-sequel is a good start. The polarizing CEO himself, Randy Pitchford, and his constant attempts at facing criticism or good publicity seem to consistently backfire. Overwatch, simply put, crushed Battleborn in nearly every category of success, like a freight train from hell. Battleborn was a gumbo of game mechanics and ideas, and sometimes the best ingredients all mixed together don't make the best stew. With both a private and public crisis of identity, Battleborn both perplexed and impressed fans, sometimes seemingly at the same time. I mean, what kind of game was Battleborn in the end? Not even the CEO of Gearbox Software could really answer that question straight. Battleborn might not have ever had its Prince Charming moment, but warts or not, the title wasn't without its positives. Offering far more heroes and content available at launch when compared to titles such as Smite, Paladins, Paragon, and even Overwatch. But offering more isn't the only solution. In fact, it's oftentimes one of the worst. When you can work more efficiently with far less development time and resources, I would assume that would have been more preferred in this scenario. Offering more options in a nutshell was both Gearbox's best aspect of Battleborn and its worst, showcasing the strengths of a game while highlighting the lack of focus as a negative in any particular avenue. The lessons to be learned from Battleborn and all of this could be put into a few small books. But I think the most important lesson to learn for developers in future projects is that expectations are absolute killers of a game. And if you fail to manage expectations properly, you can do irreparable damage to your game before it even launches. Thanks for watching, guys.